toe-fingered Donald Trump said today.
When you say off the record, it's not a legal term, but it's a term of honor. They said, President Trump said off the record, and then they go on to this. I said, this is a first. These are very dishonorable people. But I said, in the end, it's okay, because at least Canada knows how I feel. So it's fine. It's fine. It's true.
You are listening to TMI for the week of September 3rd, 2018. Do you want me to sing the national anthem? I mean, that's so funny. I mean, he's like, oh, Canada's taking advantage of us, their dairy industry. Well, I came across a U.S. trade report from this week. The Americans actually have over $420 million a year access to our market already. So the fact that, that Trump and everybody else, including CTV and CBC and everything, this is why I got angry last week on our show, was if you're going to say something, don't give only half-truths. And it's not only you, but it's like I said, CBC, CTV, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They don't give the entire story. And, and it's important to give all the facts. I mean, I remember that in journalism school. Not partial facts or truths, because just to suit your story, your byline, or how many seconds that you have on the clock, with whether you're on radio or television news, you need to get all that information down there. Who, what, when, where, how, why. So I think this is something that, we're all suffering. I don't know what it is we're suffering, collective amnesia on how to do the news properly, or how to have a good interview or conduct a good interview. But,
okay.
Yeah. Well, he's talking about dairy imports.
Okay.
Into the States.
So,
he's saying it was the same,
milk.
It's
milk.
News conference.
What dairy are we importing? Ice cream and yogurt?
I don't know. They weren't specific about it. They said that the Americans Canada gave away, okay.
Yeah, but the point is that this was already agreed to. Like, we came into those free trade negotiations saying we're sensitive about a couple things: our culture, milk, wheat, and something else. And they agreed to it.
Yeah. Well, surprise! Who knows what's going on? Oh, well, the Americans have an over $8 billion a year trade surplus with us, but Trump is telling us, oh, we're being treated badly by the Canadians. So now we have Americans hating us because they think that we're treating them badly. But they get their oil from us at $30 a barrel, when the international rate of oil is over $60 a barrel. Oh, but we treat the Americans badly. Oh, yeah, we do. Oh, they complain that there's a 300% tariff on dairy. Oh, well, you guys already have almost $500 million access to our market. We capitulated to the European Union this year with our trade, with our dairy. We capitulated to the Trans-Pacific Partnership with regards to our dairy. That was like 3%, 5% respectively, I think, or vice versa. You have Philip Couillard and all the other leaders of the Quebec political parties yesterday saying, do not capitulate in any way, shape, form, or fashion with regards to the 10,000 dairy farms in Quebec. Do not do that. And I'll tell you right now, as soon as when I heard Couillard give the news conference, I thought, I can see Quebec. That would be the thing that would rip Canada apart. Dairy tariffs. If they were to get rid of the supply management, I could see something that would be the ground to the earthquake that would start the separation process. Because if Quebec doesn't want to have anything to do with what's left of NAFTA, they can just say, no, this is not in our best interests. We have 10,000 dairy farms. This is attacking the very self-sufficiency that Quebec and Canada wants.
It looks like this week polygamist Donald Trump Googled himself and didn't like what he found.
Yeah. Word to the wise, don't Google yourself.
Because he would only know that Google results were bad if he was, sitting there Googling himself.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, it's like...
And reading the results, though.
Well, I don't think he's going to like what he saw. I mean, especially since here I've been espousing Trump going on and on and on. He's going to win the next election, and what do I hear last night when I'm out?
Isn't it like mirror, mirror on the wall?
On the wall, yeah, exactly. And it's like all of a sudden, 60% of respondents in the States say Trump is doing a terrible job and he should just leave, and they're hoping that he's going to leave. And I thought, wow, okay, last week on our show, I stand corrected. I was wrong. I said, no, Trump's going to win. The stock markets on all pistons are firing really well, and job creation is high. Unemployment's low. Blah blah blah.
Well, this is the trap we fell in before, because if only 33% support him, but 2/3 of us don't vote, you're going, oh, everything's fixed, we'll all survive.
Yeah,
but
that's what I thought.
If the 2/3 don't vote, then we're back to a majority.
Well, it's funny because it's I remember hearing about Tuesday morning, several hours after the president had tweeted. There were stories from CNN and ABC News, Fox News, and MarketWatch, and they're all had Trump talking about the results, and he kept on saying that they're being controlling and what everybody's seeing, and it's being powered by the left and all the people that are against Trump and good policy. But Google's like, no, this is not how our algorithms work. So I'm not a computer person, so I don't know if that's true or not. But what do you know at your end with regards to how search algorithms work? Is it possible to skew them?
Yeah, it would be very easy for them to skew them, but I don't think there's any dispute that most of the news stories about Trump's behavior are negative. And this is really a question only Google can answer, but, well, I mean, there's easier solutions to regulating Google. One solution is don't keep saying crazy stuff. Don't lie every day. Stop coming up with crazy policies that nobody likes except for your ridiculous 25% base.
Yeah.
That could be a solution.
Hey, it's so simple.
Well, let's look at his figures. So 53% feel he's obstructed justice.
Yeah. Okay.
63% disapprove of him.
Okay.
And 49% say impeach. That's 49%. That's
a significant number. I
mean, all you got to do is get a couple more percentages,
there you go. Exactly.
But 49, that seems pretty high.
That's high. I'm actually really surprised by that. As Trump's trade negotiations stall, his response is to impose tariffs on his own cars.
And if we don't make a deal with Canada, that's just fine. But we'll see how it all works out. I say affectionately, we'll just have to tariff those cars coming in. That's a lot of money coming into the coffers of the United States.
So I watched All the President's Men.
I have a better title. All the President's Comrades.
Boris, where are you? Oh, comrade.
I want to ask you to get Boris on the line for us because...
Well, you just heard him in the background. He was bringing me over some Belvedere vodka. Belvedere vodka, triple distilled for that smooth taste. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Belvedere Vodka. Where's my vodka? Boris here, how can I help you? Am I talking to the favorite Dave Archer from Toronto? Dave, how are you?
Jesus Christ. Well, I don't know if you've caught up with the, recent developments. The last person to be under the suspicion of the investigation is this contributor to the inauguration funds. Did you catch that?
Yes, in my Swiss bank account. Actually, I
It's
transferred the
Cyprian.
relation.
It's Cyprus.
No. That's a distraction. It was in Switzerland, then to Liechtenstein, then to Andorra, then to Cyprus, and now it's in a nondescript country that's being flooded by global warming. If the server's high enough above water, this should be okay. It's the barnacles that I'm worried about.
Now, it's Manafort's stuff focuses on his work with the Ukrainian politician.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just from what I know, the politician is drummed out of town, and in its wake, they create this new party called Opposition Bloc.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one. Yes.
And then we've got some characters. Yanukovych.
Okay.
And we have Sergei Lavochkin.
Sergei.
Lavochkin.
Sergei's a good man. Good man, Sergei.
Sergei Lavochkin. $50,000 contribution, and so the person who's recently been charged, Sam Patton, and he's been charged in court for being an undisclosed agent of a foreign interest.
Oh,
and
I was only working for Lada.
He made a plea agreement to cooperate.
Ladas are bad guys. Yes, okay, fine. So I made the plea. You cannot argue with the fact.
But they've delayed the sentencing. And they've worded the date of the sentencing as at a later date. So they've left themselves enough time to see how Sam Patton cooperates with Mueller in exchange for what may be a lighter sentence. But the other interesting thing is that I think there's a rule that when you make a plea agreement, you have to list some of these other crimes that he may have been complicit with. And they're a lot worse than failing to disclose that you're representing a foreign interest. Furthermore, and this I think came up in a podcast we had. I think we were trying to talk about Cambridge Analytica. Yeah. And the idea was that, that's all wonderful that the Trump campaign's using it, but I kept saying, there's sort of rumors of a Russian connection. And you were like, well, what's the connection? And I'd be like, crickets. Well, it turns out that not only this Sam Patton, but Manafort are all connected through these same characters and this party, Opposition Bloc, and the oligarch that funded it. And, we've got names like Konstantin Kalemnik, who I think has been charged in the United States. This is all based on an article in The Atlantic by Natasha Bertrand. Okay. Who is a brilliant person who's right on the edge of all of this. So you can look and read a little more on it. But this is the breaking story towards the end of the week, and it's focusing around that ridiculous inauguration. And they raised $107 million. Really? Well, here's the deal. The Obama inauguration was the largest inauguration party. Okay. It raised $50 million. The Trump's inauguration was $107 million. But 4 times smaller than the... So where did the money go? And there's already... this is an old story. Personal friend of Melania Trump. Okay. Who calls herself an advisor to Melania, was paid $26 million of that $107 million. We're going to find out that from the day he could get in there, he was just like Don Corleone. Everything was an opportunity to make a buck. Right from... So they went in there and started pulling out the copper and selling the drapes. Exactly. The administration, this is something we were touching upon, I think, in the last couple of podcasts about politics and why do people go into it and what is their true motive. Is there an ulterior motive? Is there altruism?
why do people get into politics? And you look at some third world or some autocratic despots, for most of them, not all, I would contend that it is to line their pockets, either while they're in office or once they get out of office, through connections that they make. And
some start right from the day they get in. The day of the inauguration, there's some kind of weird like tea or brunch that the exiting family has with the incoming. They show them where the soap is and where to clean the mold and all, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But there was a terrifying look of disgust on who normally would have been very polite and classy. Obama. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I recall that.
And it was as if he was smelling puke.
Yeah, no, it's true. This is, I mean, you look at McCain's funeral today, I guess, again today and tomorrow when he's buried, and, the one in Arizona, and listening to his granddaughter speak, and I think some of his kids might have...
Trump's playing golf right now.
Oh, is he?
Yeah. While all this is going on, he's playing golf.
His daughter and his son-in-law actually attended the funeral in Washington today. So I don't know if they're a proxy or if they're actually friends with the McCain kids, because apparently something that a long time ago when I was dating a politician's daughter, apparently a lot of politicians' kids hang out with each other because of the intense spotlight on families and what have you. It's kind of like actors' kids, they all hang out together, and bitch and complain how well they have it.
Okay, let me throw this at you. The $50,000 that was funneled into the inauguration, in the end, through an American from an oligarch into the hands of the intermediary. How that was finally written as a check in America was $50,000 for 4 seats and an event.
$50,000 for
4 tickets to the inauguration. So I'm just saying, the Trumps, if they're not invited, and then Ivanka and Eric and Donnie Jr. show up, it reminds me of, was it $25,000 a seat? Did they have to? Because it cleanses the Trumps if their kids are at the, it's politics.
Yeah, and we've been saying all along since the podcast started last year, when we've been working together, this is nothing more base than politics. And, a pox on all the houses, whether they be liberal Democrats, conservative Republicans, what have you. Everybody's got their fingers in the pie. It's just who's going to get caught.
We keep seeing the pictures of Trump sitting there with that weird look on his face as they ask him, why weren't you invited to the funeral? Do you have anything to say about him being a hero? And that, it's not just me now, because I think I did mention this last week.
Yeah, you did.
That picture of him with that look on his face.
Oh, yeah.
Keeps coming up.
Oh, I can see it burnt my brain. His hands are, his pudgy little fat hands are like balled up in little angry fists.
You have to look pretty close to see the hands, though, don't you?
Well, that's what I saw. I mean, because I would just, you can
because they're so tiny, but his hands are so small.
Yeah. These little, Vienna sausage fingers, like curled up, tight little armadillo fingers. They look like scrunched under his sweaty little armpits. And he just has this, like he's trying to pass a stool. Trump's response to the Mueller probe.
Doing their job, doing it right, and doing it now. Because people are angry. What's happening is a disgrace. And at some point, I wanted to stay out, but at some point, if it doesn't straighten out properly, I want them to do their job. I will get involved, and I'll get in there if I have to. Disgraceful.
The Donald Trump and Cohen tape, which we've played on the podcast, it had some bits in it that didn't make any sense. It was like, whoa, if he
Elaborate.
gets hit by a truck. Like, it had some stuff in it that didn't make any sense.
Okay.
I thought Cohen was speaking cryptically when he said, yeah, about that information that we want to transfer from, or...
Yeah.
He used the term information in a weird way. He used a bunch of terms in the tape that I wrote off of them being a little bit cryptic, or I'm stupid. But it turns out that that whole conversation wasn't necessarily about just paying off McDougal. It was buying that whole safe. And the idea was that the context that wasn't really clear, I think it was the New Yorker who wrote an article this week on it. It turns out that the owner, David Pecker, may not remain the owner forever, and then you'd have this safe who would be floating around, maybe would fall into less friendly hands. Here's what I want to know.
Right.
We're talking about a safe full of dirt on Trump that goes back to the 80s. And even in this tape, and in the accusations, they're talking about buying this whole safe full of dirt on Donald Trump. Here's the thing. How come nobody's used the word blackmail? Because you have all the elements of a blackmail. Like, all you would have to do is threaten to release that information, and then Donald Trump would pay anything for that safe full of dirt, right? But here we have them trying to buy it, presumably because David Pecker may...
Well, he just resigned from the board.
You have all the elements. Like, if it walks like a duck. Like, when you have all the elements of a blackmail, except that one little motive. Considering that we're lied to in every way every single day, and that we learn things each week, it's not a leap to... They're paying money for a safe full of dirt.
Yeah, when you put it that way.
Anyway, I just find that amazing because there's that tape. We played it on the show. I didn't fully understand it. It seemed to be talking about McDougal, but it really was talking about all of the information. And that's why the word information's used in the tape. And that weird reference to being hit by a truck means, what if David Pecker were hit by a truck? Then that safe would fall into maybe the hands of the board or other members of AMI that may not be as friendly. Furthermore, AMI, or the Inquirer, is losing $75 million a year. That's a hell of an expense. Wonder who's shoring up that loss. And if it is sitting on decades of juicy stories on Trump, I wonder if AMI's Inquirer sales would be higher had they been releasing stories about Trump each week. Maybe we'd all be buying the Inquirer at the checkout. So here they are, sitting on a safe full of dirt on the most famous person, quote, in the free world, unquote. And then they're losing $75 million a year. Wonder why, just saying. It's pretty weird.
So we got served from the New York Times. I told you this regarding to unseal the divorce papers with Ivana. We're fighting it. Kaslowitz is going to...
You'll never be able to get that done.
Never. Kaslowitz doesn't. They'll ever be able. They don't have a...
Give me your coat, please.
They don't have a legitimate purpose.
And you have a woman that doesn't want to unseal.
Correct.
So you've been handling it.
Yes, and it's all...
It's been going on for a while.
For about 2-3 weeks now.
All you have to do is delay it for...
Even after that, it's not going to ever be opened. There's no purpose for it. Told you about Charleston. I need to open up a company for the transfer of all of that info regarding our friend David, so that I'm going to do that right away. I've actually come up and I've spoken to Alan Weisselberg about how to set the whole thing up with
So what are we going to pay?
Funding. Yes. And it's all the stuff, because you never know where that company, you never know where he's going to be.
Gets hit by it.
Correct. So I'm all over that, and I spoke to Alan about it when it comes time for the financing, which will be.
Listen, what financing?
We'll have to pay you. So
Don't pay with cash.
No. I got no.
Giuliani criticizes a crackdown on corruption in Romania. Romania, long considered one of the most corrupt states in the European Union, has made energetic efforts to root out graft. that has entangled prominent lawmakers. Some have pushed back, angering corruption-wary citizens who have rallied by the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands at times. Now, unexpectedly, Rudolph W. Giuliani, President Trump's personal attorney, has waded into the debate on the side of the accused, sending a letter to Romania's President Klaus Iohannis criticizing the country's anti-corruption efforts.
So didn't he make his name by prosecuting?
Yeah, he did. He made his name prosecuting the mafia and everybody.
So, and what does New York have to do with Romania?
Because Giuliani has been working with a former FBI director, and they have a consulting group along with his own law firm. It's called the Free Group, Freeh, and he was, I think, somebody high up in the FBI. Free, the former director of the FBI. Sorry, Louis J. Free. It's called Free Group International Solutions, a security company by Louis J. Free, former director of the FBI. So Giuliani and him have been working together, and so they out to the highest bidder, whoever has the bucks. And so Giuliani fired off a letter on August 22nd, expressed concern about the, quote, continuing damage to the rule of law being done under the guise of effective law enforcement in Romania. And he's saying, basically, you're being too diligent and too good in what you're doing. And they're calling it, he's calling it an excess.
So it's too much like Mueller's investigation.
Yeah.
Here's something you're going to like. Now, you mentioned the story a few times. Maybe 3 times, 4 times. And it only made it on the show once because it was so crazy. Mm-hmm. And it's your stupid Cuban embassy attack with your Sonic.
Oh, yeah.
It's that story you kept going on about how Americans at the embassy in Cuba were being taken away to hospital for inexplicable...
And Canadian diplomats. Yeah, and Canadians.
Okay, so bring us up to date on the story you told back then. Just briefly.
Yeah, this a couple of years ago, after the Americans reopened their embassy in Havana, Cuba. This was under the Obama administration. Canadian and American diplomats and their families started reporting really bad headaches, nosebleeds, amongst other symptoms.
Weren't they coming away deaf? There was some
of them, there was auditory damage had been detected. Yeah. And within the last 365 days, the U.S. has evacuated their embassy in Havana.
Oh, you've been keeping up to date with this.
Oh, yeah, most definitely.
So I cut it out a few times because it was too much information. Okay?
Yeah.
Turns out, William J. Broad, September 1, 2018, the New York Times.
Oh.
It's, one of the top 3 stories on the page of the New York Times.
Okay.
So I'll just read the first little bit. During the Cold War, Washington feared that Moscow was seeking to turn microwave radiation into a covert weapon of mind control. More recently, the American military itself sought to develop microwave arms that could invisibly beam painfully loud booms and even spoken words into people's heads.
Oh, fuck.
The aims were to disable attackers and wage psychological warfare. Now doctors and scientists say such unconventional weapons may have caused the baffling symptoms and ailments that started in late 2016 and hit more than 36 American diplomats and family members in Cuba and China.
And China. Wow.
The Cuban incidents resulted in diplomatic rupture between Havana and Washington. The medical team that examined 21 affected diplomats from Cuba made no mention of microwaves. It is in its detailed report published in JAMA in March. Douglas H. Smith, the study's head, author, director of the Center for brain injury and repair at the University of Pennsylvania, said recent interview microwaves were now considered a main suspect, and the team was increasingly sure the diplomats had suffered brain injury.
Whoa.
So there's your,
And
what's
that was
his name?
the Journal of American Medical Association. Okay. JAMA, yeah, that's what it is.
What's the crazy guy who got kicked off iTunes the other day?
Alex Jones.
Okay. So there's your crazy Alex Jones tinfoil hat conspiracy theory.
Yeah, I never heard that from Alex Jones, first of all. I heard that from the CBC and Toronto Star. So,
well, I'm trying to discredit you and that story as being tinfoil hat Alex Jones fodder.
Yeah, and
But
that's what the conservatives were doing after the first Iraq War with depleted uranium, and everybody who was like, all that crazy left-wing loony shit, and I'm like, what?
Don't be a sore winner. Okay.
I'm not a sore winner. I'm just saying, it's just if people need to look at things with an open mind, for God's sake. I mean. Get your sonic microwave weapons. Well, okay, let's throw this out
Now,
there.
if you could just put that on a little drone.
Wouldn't be surprised if it's already weaponized like that. Okay, so this is taking place, riddle me this, Batman. This is taking place now in Havana. I was not aware that this was happening I'm assuming in Beijing.
Well, don't assume.
Okay, I'm not assuming. Okay.
China.
But just throwing it out there, who do you
just
think
like all these
could be
stories.
behind it? The Canadians and the Americans were both attacked, right? So we didn't evacuate our embassy, as far as I know, and just had essential personnel like the Americans. So who? Russians? The
way
Chinese?
it goes is it was probably Obama bought a whole bunch of weed and imported it into the country and took the funds and then funded some secret organization that went down and tested it on their own diplomats. I mean, anything's believable. Well, that's a Iran-Contra reference there. But but you're surprised that China was mentioned in that little article.
Yeah. I didn't know that one. Yeah, that's like, wow. Okay. I thought it was just in Havana.
So all you have to do is say, and one example in Russia, and now you don't know who is the culprit, yeah?
No, I don't. No. I mean, it could be who has
How about the Americans know it's China, and they put the word China in the news story? Because now you don't think it's China.
Oh, I would never say it's not China.
Well, then why would you say it's not the Americans? Because they did it to their own American embassy? Why isn't it the Cubans? Because
Canada's always had a really good relationship under Trudeau Sr. with, so it'd be counterintuitive.
Why isn't it Putin? I mean, who's more pissed off about Cuba, but the Russian USSR, was from which there could have been World War III in 1962?
62.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, anything's possible. I mean,
well, who is it? The logical answer is Russians.
Or the Chinese.
The highest technology. They've got axe to grind in Cuba. The enemy in Cuba was America. The enemy in the election scandal is America. Why isn't it? Who's the most active anti-American state currently? Russia?
China.
Really? They're making a mint off us. How are they our enemy?
Easy.
Yeah.
I mean,
What?
we keep on challenging them with regards to the South China Sea expansions, making islands.
Have we
out of
been
nothing
limiting
and
their
disputed
imports? Or no?
We've stopped them from buying Acon. We've stopped them from
What's
buying
Acon?
Maynard, a huge construction consortium here in Canada.
AECon.
Econ, sorry.
Yeah, that's because AECon is the major contractor that builds nuclear power plants, and China
I'm just saying we're
has been
thwarting their
buying
efforts
CANDU nuclear reactors.
Yeah, we're thwarting their efforts to purchase badly needed fossil fuels and stuff like that, and mines and what have you. So I could see the Chinese being very angry at us. on a rainy evening in the fall of '84. It was at the intersection of River and Dundas Street East. I remember. Before I met you, I saw in the distance the flash of lights. It was just an ordinary streetscape at first, but it soon became apparent this was not ordinary. I remember. The streetscape, new and old, rustic, avant-garde, and garish. The city lights, a rainbow reflecting off the wet sidewalks and pavements and streetcar tracks. The sound, the murmur of conversation, mixed with the grind of metal streetcar wheels on metal rails. I remember. My journey from home to an East End party came to an abrupt stop at the corner of River and Dundas Street East. I recall. The scene was of confusion, and there were a crowd of people, and it was there I first saw you. Mary, the crowd had gathered around you, standing, staring, anxious. As I stepped down from the streetcar and seeing the crowd spill from the sidewalks onto the street, again, I saw you, alone, vulnerable, alone. There on the rain-soaked pavement and streetcar tracks, you lay on your back, looking to the black night sky, your belongings scattered on the street like a lost child. I remember. I recall our conversation, the pleasant surprise of your voice the first time I heard it, a soft Scottish accent. I asked you if you could wiggle your toes, your fingers, the basic emergency first aid questions. As I quickly assessed you while waiting for the EMS. It was during the initial conversation that I learned that you were from Scotland. Mary, I recall taking off my jacket and placing it under your head, and you asked that I hold your hand. It was a few minutes after the ambulance took you to hospital when the EMS person approached me and said that you had died. Internal injuries, they thought. I cried, and I still remember. What Trump thinks about the Democrats and fake news at his most recent rally in North Carolina a couple of nights ago.
These are just dishonest, terrible people. I'm telling you that. Terrible people. Today's Democrat Party is held hostage by left-wing haters, angry mobs, deep state radicals, establishment cronies, and their fake news allies. We've got stories that are so big and the media doesn't pick them up. We have stories that if that was about a Republican or a conservative, it'd be front page of every newspaper. And we have them and they just don't want to write them. It's a dishonest group of people. I will tell you that.
Find us on Twitter @thatarcher. Send us an email, archer@twxnet.com. For guest links and contact info, visit our podcast page, tmi.twxnet.com. Find us on Android and Apple Podcast apps. Subscribe and rate the show on iTunes.
This week's headlines. An oozing, often toxic symptom of climate change and fast-warming waters. All 2,700 miles of shoreline have come under increased scrutiny by scientists after this summer's largest mass of green oozing algae that has ever been detected in the lake. It's affected water intake systems and everything else. They actually had to shut down the water intake because the toxic algae formed over the city's water intake pipe. Because of its depth, and it's very shallow, and you have that part of southwestern Ontario, although it's great to have local Ontario produce in the wintertime, but one of the nasty little side effects is the fertilizer. And so the fertilizer is going into the Great Lakes, and boom, you got these nasty algae blooms that have been forming. So whether it's in Lake Superior, Lake Erie, off the Florida coast, and all the manta rays that have been dying, and turtles and all this other wildlife, it's all because of the algae blooms. So even a guy in Toronto just no, it's a symptom of the warming waters and the fertilizer. There's a man this week whose dog died just outside of Whitby. His dog went in to play in the water, catch sticks. Within half an hour or something like that of coming out of the water, his dog was lethargic and falling down. And that night, he took his dog to the vet, and it died. So they didn't do an autopsy, but what they ended up discovering was that in Oshawa and Pickering, they'd been warning people not to go into the water with their animals, but in Whitby, they didn't get that warning. And so the guy went in there, and it's called the blue algae, and it just attacked the dog's kidneys and the rest of his vital organs, and it killed him within 12 hours.
Well, and I mentioned on a previous show how they shut down multiple reactors at Pickering due to algae
like
blocking the water intake.
Exactly. And that's just like with Toledo in 2014. Cannabis users fear being outed even when drug is legal. Questions linger for consumers on how data will be protected. They're worried about, if you're going to be ordering online, where is this information being held? If you're going into some of these cannabis stores, you have to show your ID and they hold it up to a camera. Again, where is all this data and all this information going? So that's pretty interesting. 700 people that have been left homeless by a fire in the St. Jamestown apartment building have been left homeless. They're now being told they must leave hotels. So
there was a story like that a few years ago. There was a fire in one of those buildings, and there was a pack rat who had stored papers to the ceiling, and it burned, and then the residents couldn't come back. And I think I remember stories of people with pets weren't able to go feed their pets even. That once they sort of close it off, you can't go in and take important prescriptions.
So a lot of these people apparently are, originally it was 1,265 people. Initially on August 21st, 1,500 people at 650 Parliament Street were evacuated. And 578 people found their own accommodations. 687 were provided with emergency shelter services.
We need a tenant's bill of rights. I mean, as real estate gets more and more expensive, we have more and more renting.
Yeah.
Because only giant corporations and
well, we're facing that problem here in Ottawa. Timber Creek, which is a developer, is in the process of kicking out about 1,000 people who've been living in these townhomes just near Heron Gates because they're just dilapidated and run down. Now, you can blame it on the tenants, you can blame it on the landlord, but they have until September 30th to be out. And there's a rental shortage here in Ottawa. About 100,000 students have just arrived back at the University of Ottawa in Carleton. Nova Scotia raises concerns about spaceport. There's a spaceport that is going to be built in Canso, Nova Scotia, and so there's some questions about the Canso spaceport facility and its 20-hectare site about what's going to happen if one of these rockets happens to crash, because they don't know. Apparently, they're saying the fuels that they use in this damn thing will leave because of the conservation area. This is the soils in that area are very thin because of the wet, cold climate, and it's going to take
benzene and weird.
Yeah, nitrogen tetroxide and unsymmetrical dimethane hydrazine. That's used for the second portion of it once into the atmosphere.
Everywhere, and this sounds like the U.S. military, but everywhere they go, the cleanup afterwards, one, it never happens, but is not possible to do. It sounds like.
So there you go.
Yeah, there's, is there going to be an environmental impact study and penalties and requirements for structured decommissioning of the site? I mean, it's a nuclear power parallel. All right, next.
Okay, well, this is an interesting thing, and this is, I guess, maybe a reason why we don't want this in Canada. Um, in the U.S., hottest drilling spot, volumes of gas go up in smoke. With the consent of from Texas regulators, producers flare freely in the state's Permian Basin. So what's basically happening here? $1 million worth of natural gas is being flared every day, and they just don't have any way to move this gas from their fracking and their oil drilling. And
That's just a pure greenhouse gas that they're emitting.
Oh yeah. They're saying that there's over 20,000 companies have been given permission just to flare off this thing.
Yeah.
And
people
so
have been complaining about fracking for a long time. I mean, they inject a chemical into the
soil
that they drill, and they pressurize that, and that's what fractures the rock. And then they claim they reclaim some of that fluid, but you
yeah. So
they
say Permian Basin production has soared to nearly 3.3 million barrels of oil and nearly 11 billion cubic feet of natural gas in June. With it, so has flaring, which topped 320 million cubic feet a day in the second quarter, according to analysis of the public data complied by Randstad Energy, an energy consulting and research firm. Stocks fall on Trump's pending China tariff, U.S. preparing to tax $200 billion in imports. U.S. stocks skidded late Thursday following a report that Trump administration could put $200 billion U.S. in Chinese goods as early as next week. Pipeline shockwaves felt across Canada, the ruling. So Alberta has now vowed to pull out of the climate plan after court quashes approval of Trans Mountain. I thought this is going to be interesting for Ontario. Business group calls for full repeal of workplace law. Chamber of Commerce says changes are affecting small businesses. So an umbrella body representing 60,000 Ontario small business owners is calling for the Ford government to fully repeal the most sweeping changes to workplace protections in decades, including higher minimum wage, equal pay for protections of workers from temporary agencies, and paid emergency leave. So they want everything rolled back, and it looks like it might end up happening.
The more the provincial government disappoints these people, the less likely they feel that their voice is being heard. And does it roll out a bunch of angry working class voters, or does it disenfranchise them and discourage them from, because clearly their voice is not important and isn't heard. So is that going to increase working people? Because your thing is, well, if you don't like it, vote against it. But by doing stuff like that, I think it just takes a whole group of people and says you're not part of that's what's considered important.
It's giving partial information or inaccurate information, because if you were to look at the numbers for July, the province's jobless rate fell to 5.4%, and that's been the lowest in 18 years. And it's lower than every other province in Canada with the exception of British Columbia. So there you go. Airport has opened gaming parlors to occupied travelers. So virtual reality companies figure layover time spent in airports you should spend playing.
Well, that's interesting. We used to have arcades back in the 80s.
Yeah, it's called Periscape VR. Charges $10 for 10 minutes with a video headset and offers a discount for longer blocks of time. So we'd like to thank our future sponsor, Periscope VR, and we hope to get it at $5 for 5 minutes. But anyway, so this is something that's new that's coming. It's already in some airports in the United States, in Minneapolis and in Portland, Oregon, and in San Francisco. Yeah. This week, the World Health Organization has said that any drinking whatsoever is just not good. It's just, that's it. You got to stop because of the risks of cancer in the stomach, cancer in the colon, cancer in the esophagus, all that other stuff. So now everybody's like, vacillating back and forth. Okay, can you just have one drink a day? I mean, like, you're going to destroy an entire industry, or can you have no drinks a day?
And so they're saying it's a linear no threshold,
Yeah.
meaning that a small amount gives
Yeah.
a consistent amount
Yeah.
of damage, and a large amount gives a proportionally consistent amount of damage.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I mean, having two people I know say that they think that they got their cancer from drinking because they love their wine and they love their beer, and then they both got stomach cancer.
And that's the World Health Organization?
Yeah, that's
so it's funny because the accepted principle in nuclear health is linear no threshold. But the World Health Organization is banned from making comments on nuclear. They defer to the IAEA. So it's just interesting to hear a linear no threshold argument for alcohol, where the WHO is unable to comment on the linear no threshold of atomic particles.
Well,
Don't you find that interesting? Come on.
Oh, I do find. No, it is
there you go.
interesting. It is interesting. I mean,
I'm Dave Archer in Toronto.
I'm Ian Stolberg in Ottawa.